This video brought to you by our Patreons. Please consider supporting this channel and joining our Patreons at patreon.com/NovaWing24.
Hi there folks, my name's NovaWing24 and welcome to another little review of a Microsoft Flight Simulator product. So today we are having a look at what is quite simply possibly one of the greatest aeroplanes ever produced in the history of aviation. And of course I am referring to this beautiful rendition of a Supermarine Spitfire, in particular a LF Mk IX brought to life to us by Flyingiron Simulations. So we're going to be having a look at this aircraft today. We're going to be going through a bit of a detail here, having a look at it, maybe even exploring some of its history, going through doing a test flight here, checking it out and giving our rendition and our review of this rendition in the sim. So before we get too far into it, I do want to say a huge shout out and a huge thank you to Flyingiron Simulations for providing the review copy of this aircraft today. And we're going to be taking off here, so this is version 1.01 that we are reviewing today, so it's the first patch post-release. We're going to go through, we're going to be flying the standard wing variant, but we will be talking about the clipped wing variant while we are during the review as well. Alright, so probably let's get started here. So we're going to do pretty much our standard formatted review here. We're going to have a look at the outside, we're going to jump into the office, get into the air and go through put this beautiful aircraft through its paces. Alright, so first thing to note here is that Flyingiron Simulations are a bit of a veteran when it comes to doing the rendition of the Mk IX, the LF Mk IX. This is according to their website, this is the third sim that they have brought it to life in. Now, from their website, you can only buy it in two. You can buy it in X-Plane 11 and you can buy it in Microsoft Flight Simulator. I do believe, though, that they had at least a hand, or at least with the leading developer behind the rendition in DCS World. So that would be my guess as the third sim. So it's very interesting. So definitely the developers got the pedigree to be able to bring it to life, and I've got to say that overall I think they've done pretty damn well for a sim that is still not even a year old. Alright, so in terms of that, so bringing that of course to life here is that the external model of the aircraft is incredibly well done. Like, it is beautifully exquisite. The details that come through here with the modeling of the Merlin 66 engine. So it is as I said, it is an LF Mk IX. So a low flying Mk IXC is the variant that is modeled here. Although the liveries that are given to us represent a range of Mk IX airframes. And as I said, it also ships with two different versions of the aircraft as well. And it isn't just a cosmetic difference here. They do actually have different performance characteristics. And I'll probably talk a bit more about that once we are in the air. Alright, so as I said, as well, we've been making our way around the externals of the aircraft here. As you can see, it is an incredibly detailed rendition of the aircraft. Like, it just looks absolutely gorgeous. It really does. Like, I can't fault the external model. Like, I absolutely cannot fault it. I really can't. The livery that I've chosen to do the review in today is an Australian livery, which is called the Grey Nurse. Funny enough, there's a shark as well, shark teeth on there. So it's nice. I thought it was a nice touch to be able to do an Australian texture in here. It does ship with the Silver Spit, just with a livery inspired by that airframe. It also ships with an Israeli colour scheme, a couple of Royal Air Force ones, with a Free Polish Squadron also included. Also ships with a South African Air Force one as well. So quite a range of operators and different textures are included with this particular release. Alright, so that's enough of us going through the external model here. Let's jump into the office, into the cockpit, and let's get ourselves started and go through and explore this aircraft in a bit more detail. Alright, so here we are in the office of the Mk IX Spitfire, and it is just incredibly well appointed. Like, I've got to first off just say, like, one of the things I love about aircraft like this is the fact that, they're very basic, but that doesn't mean that it's not challenging, and for different reasons, and we'll talk about that as this review goes on. But it just gives you a concept of how challenging and how much more engaged you are as a pilot in an aircraft like this. So first of all, I'll just show that, because that's just Awesome. Anyway, also you're going to say that the internal modeling looks beautiful, and the texturing and the work that's been done by the team is just absolutely gorgeous. It really is. Like, this is just nuts. I love this. The other thing to point out is, of course, this is a Mark IX, so this is a later model of Spitfire. So this came to life in 1942. So sort of during 1942, this aircraft came to life. It was actually, funnily enough, it was rushed into service because of an emergent need of the Focke-Wulf 190 beginning to oppose British forces in Europe. It was actually meant to be a stopgap fighter, not what would end up being the largest number produced single Mark that was produced. So it was a very interesting history behind it as well, and we'll try and talk about that a bit more later. All right. Now, first things first is that, again, I want to use a huge shout out to the team as well, because I want to point out that the developer has actually also included a full the full checklist as well. Everything is set here, which is great. Now, a couple of things as well. So a couple of things I did have when this was first released. I had a couple of quality of life issues, most of which have been fixed in this first patch. The first one being the issue of the parking brake not being clickable, but now it is. So it's by default when you load in, it is set, which can also cause some quirky issues, which we'll talk about later. So you can set that one set here. So what we'll do is we'll do our startup, and we'll do it according to the checklist here. So let's get that done here. So first of all, we're going to do our parking brake is set. All right, battery on. So battery is hiding down here in the switch here. So turn battery master on. There we go. That's done. All right, prop control is forward, full forward. All right, fuel tanks set to on. Mixture is set to idle cutoff. Set throttle 1/4 inch open. Wobble or booster pump until the fuel pressure warning light goes out. So this is our wobble pump. So we're going to wobble this a little bit. So you're a lot more engaged than you are in some of the more aircraft that you might be used to in MSFS. Okay, fuel pressure is set. All right, prime. All right, so first of all, we're going to unlock the primer. We do 3 shots of primer. Go. Okay, starter, safety booster calls are open. Mixture set to auto, full forward. Magnetos set to on. Starter and booster engage. That beautiful sound of that Merlin engine coming to life is just amazing. Like, it just is beautiful. I love it so much. And they've nailed most of the sounds right. The sounds get a little off when we're flying, but definitely on the start they sound absolutely perfect. All right. So we've used check, as I said. So I do want to give a huge shout out to them for using the checklist there. Great to see, and complete with the highlights as well if you're not sure where anything is. Alright, so we can close that one there. Let's do a couple of housekeeping with this one here. Let's get our nav lights, position lights are on. We're going to close our cockpit door. We are going to leave our canopy open while we do our taxi here. Alright, now we just finish checking all my other presets here. Okay, so we're going to cover, we're going to close those covers now. That's good. Alright, now down here we're going to put our pitot heat is going to be set to on. If I can, now that is probably one thing, is that sometimes the switches can be a little bit challenging to actually get to if your pump is on. Okay, so that is good. Everything is looking good here. Now, the other thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to set the rudder trim. And now, you do have to have quite a bit of rudder trim in during takeoff here, because the torque of the engine is... The Merlin 66 produces a lot of torque when you do the takeoff on the takeoff roll. So it will catch you unawares, and it will wreck you and your flight very quickly if you're not paying attention. All right, so let's turn. Parking brake is off. Okay, tow brakes set. All right, so let's do taxi out. Now, of course, one of the challenges of aircraft like this is the fact that your positioning is so high that it's difficult. You cannot see exactly directly in front of you. So the method that you use for taxiing is that you actually do what's called S-taxiing. So essentially you look sort of over the shoulder, or sort of, you know, over the side of the engine mount there. So you do this sort of, you know, S shapes along the taxiway in order so you can get to where you're going, which is a challenge in and of itself, to make sure that you don't run too far off the edge if you're not careful. There's a very narrow wheelbase on this aircraft as well, which can cause quite a few issues as you go on. Now we are going to be departing. We're going to depart from the grass runway here, much like the aircraft of when they were first introduced into service. They would more likely be using grass runways instead of hard surface runways. So we're going to take off from the grass runway over here. Taxi over onto the threshold. Now, one of the key parts about taking this aircraft off is that you have to be very gentle with her, because if you overreact, she will come back and kick you in the ass. And be prepared for that kick of the engine as the torque increases. Gear up. But she's just so beautiful, like she just wants to leap into the sky. But as I said, if you didn't have that rudder, as I said, I have that rudder trim set to help counter that. I'll sort of bring that back to a little, not quite neutral for our flight here, because otherwise I have, when preparing for this review, more than a few times I ended up crashed and wrecked on the side of the runway, and same with landing as well. Now, as I was saying before, this aircraft is the LF Mk IX, so it's a low fly Mk IX. So it's rated for, it's designed for low to medium altitudes. So basically, sort of sub 15,000 feet operations. You can take it higher, like with the Merlin 61 that it was first equipped with, the Merlin 66 that this aircraft is modelled with, do offer you to do a higher altitude flight, but the performance is definitely, and we'll just close the canopy there. Again, I really like how the fact that the audio does have that impact, so when the canopy is closed, you do have that engine noise does drop, which is nice to have. It's just, yeah, sound set's beautiful. Anyway, so yes, it's a low, it's a medium altitude. You can take this up to quite high altitude because the Merlins are rated for high altitude as well, but it is optimized to be flown sort of sub 15,000 feet. So we'll be keeping fairly low today as we're flying over the UK countryside. Alright, so as I said, we've got everything nice and set up here. As I said, the cockpit is beautifully well laid out, and the aircraft, just like the real aircraft as well, is incredibly maneuverable, incredibly agile, but also incredibly docile as well. So I'm gonna push our throttles up, get my trim out here, get our altitude right at the moment. Now I know some people sort of say, well, you know, so we've got we've got our reflector gun sight here in front of us. We've got the high spanner cannons in the wings. Do the weapons work? No, they do not. So that's the first thing to be aware of. There is the reflector gun sight switch there, but it is currently inoperative. So that is you can't actually switch it on or off. Other than that, it's probably pretty much the main things you need to know. A couple of quirks that the aircraft does have in terms of operations and the like as well. This is your communications over here. So in order to energize or power up your radio circuits in order to be able to communicate with ATC, if you do use ATC in the sim, you will need to be able to switch on to at least one of these channels in order to be able to start using the in-sim ATC. Okay, otherwise by default it just sets to off, and these are the different radio channels in the real aircraft. They're just sort of 4 different pre-programmed radio channels that you would have in the aircraft. Alright, that's pretty much the main things that I sort of have to tell you about the cockpit. As I said, it's incredibly well designed. Well, the aircraft itself is incredibly well designed, and it's just an incredibly stunningly well done portrayal of this aircraft. Like, it's just so good. Like, it's just such an amazing... It's just... Bringing it to life, as I said, it's amazing. It does have its quirks. So let's jump on the outside. Let's have a look at the outside of the aircraft, and then what we might do is do some maneuvers, and then we'll talk about some of the idiosyncrasies that this add-on does have. So looking around the aircraft from the outside while we're flying, I mean, we pretty much saw the 3D model before. As I said, the 3D model is just absolutely gorgeous. One thing that you may notice, sort of compared to other Spitfires, say the Mark I, Mark II, or the Mark V, is that the engine cowling is a bit wider, and that's to accommodate the Merlin 60 series, 60 and 70 series of engines that were used in the Mark IX family. It did actually end up getting wider with when the Griffin engine Spitfire started coming into existence, and this was sort of the first sort of precursor of that in their design. So it does have the slightly more bulbous nose there for that one on the sides of the nose of the engine bay. Other than that, as I said, it comes with 2 different variants. So the version we're doing most of the review in today is the standard Mark IXC with the Type C wing, which has the 20mm cannon along with 4 303 Browning machine guns as well. As I said, none of which are operational in the sim. Beyond that, we also have the radiators are actually fully functional as well, and actually controlled by a switch that you saw me engage at the start during engine startup as well. If you actually turn the radiator flap switch off, these vents actually do close in the aircraft as well. So, and your engine temperature will rise if you're not careful as well. So, just something to be aware of. Just something to be aware of. Other than that, as I said, this aircraft is just incredibly well done. The liveries that it includes are all in beautiful high definition textures as well, beautifully well done. Cannot fault them at all, and just everything about this aircraft just looks absolutely stunning. Alright, well, enough of flying and very docile. Let's put this aircraft through a couple of maneuvers and see how she flies. So the reason for the Mark IX to come into existence, as I said, alluded to earlier, it was actually originally designed as a stopgap solution. So the Mark VIII was intended to be the definitive version of the Spitfire, and had incorporated various aerodynamic improvements, redesign of the tail, and several other features. But emerging in 1942 was the Focke-Wulf FW190, which outclassed and outmatched everything that was currently available for the Royal Air Force. So they had to find something to counter it very, very quickly and very urgently. So literally what happened is they took a Mark III or a Mark V Spitfire, and they grabbed an engine that was designed for a Wellington bomber at high altitude, the Merlin 61. And they literally chucked it into a Spitfire and said, let's see what happens. And what they created was absolutely astounding to all the pilots. They couldn't believe what the kind of performance increase that they got. They got an aircraft that was perfectly capable of operating at low, medium, and high altitudes, could outperform, outturn, and outrun a Focke-Wulf 190. Which then led to them being rushed into production as the original Mark IX. Then the Mark IX was then given the Merlin 63, and then the Merlin 66 engines, and then eventually the Merlin 70 engine. So the LF Mark IXC, which was the one which had the largest number of production units, mostly made at the Shadow factory at Castle Bromwich, was given the Merlin 66 engine, which is the one that's been renditioned here in this aircraft. And that one gave us its best performance set, optimized for sort of 15,000 feet or lower, but gave its highest performance at its top speed at 21,000 feet, 416 miles per hour. Now, one of the things that it gave this aircraft incredible speed was the fact that it is fast, which can also be a problem once you try and land. But it also gave the aircraft a lot of maneuverability. So let's test that out. The roll rate was something. Nice clean roll rate. Now, what's interesting is that if you do the same maneuver in the clipped wing variant, the clipped wing variant actually rolls faster, because it was originally done as a field modification that later became a factory standard modification, where they would actually take the wingtips off the wings to actually enable higher roll rates and actually end up being better performance overall. Alright, now let's try one of their signature maneuvers. Would be a dive. Inverted roll. Just smoothly flies so through, and it feels light and feels maneuverable and feels really tight turning circle as well. Now, I'm no Spitfire pilot in real life, but it definitely feels like this would be the right thing. And there's just something about flying a warbird. There really is just something it's about flying a warbird, even if it's just virtually flying one. There is just something about it where you just can't you can't compare it to a modern aircraft. You really can't. A couple other things to quickly point out as well is that the mirror here is quasi-working. It's blurred, but it does actually reflect, and you can catch the sun during that as well. Alright, so I think we've got a couple of things here. Alright, now, as I said, this aircraft, as wonderful as it is, does have a couple of quirks. So, let's go and have a look at a couple of those, shall we? So, the first one we see is when you first load into the sim. If you load in cold and dark, as it's at a parking spot, you will notice the aircraft is in a slightly unusual attitude. So this is to... I honestly, I don't know. I'm about to say I know what it is to do with, but honestly, I don't know what it's to do with. But it's rather amusing. It's kind of weird. It doesn't affect the game at all, or the sim at all, the sim in any way. Once you load in, click ready to fly. The tail simply drops down, no damage. I've got it with damage turned on, no problems at all, just a little disconcerting. The other one, however, is a little bit more backbreaking. Now, the other one is if you load in at the runway, at an active runway. Now, this only applies if you have the taxi animation turned on and available. If you let the animation play out, something rather unfortunate will happen to your aircraft once your AI starts taxiing. And you will crash. That is a known bug. It's because of the way the parking brakes are modeled in the sim and the aircraft. So the developer is aware of it. They are working on it. The way around that is simply click ready to fly before it gets to that point of the animation, and you're good to go. So it's not a showstopper. Just an interesting little quirk. So here we have the clipped wing version of the aircraft. So internally in the cockpit, it is exactly the same. The power plant is the same, but by whatever design and magic of this aircraft design, it is actually a slightly faster aircraft. Its stalling speed is higher, and its roll rate is a lot faster as well. Which we'll showcase in a moment. So it just is a sort of bit of a history sort of thing here. So the wing that was the standard Supermarine Spitfire wing composite construction, and often made by Rolls-Royce coach builders. So the actual wingtip section here, so this is a normal elliptical sort of edge of the wingtip there, was just there was a spar there. So literally they just there was a couple of screws, couple of bolts holding it on. So literally they just unbolted it and put a fairing over the top. That was it. That's literally all they did to it. And as I said, it was originally done as an in-field modification. But then it was actually tested by the Air Ministry and actually sort of the two, same aircraft, same engine, just with clipped wings, one without. And it was found that the clipped wing variant at lower altitudes was faster and had a higher roll rate, high performing roll rate as well. Now, to have a feel of that high performance roll rate, let's jump inside and see what it feels like. So we did the roll rate test in the other aircraft before, so let's see what it's like in this aircraft here. So let's put our max boost on here. So it is a little faster, and also in approach, your stalling speed is higher. So your soaring speed is higher, and just your general all-round performance envelope is a lot tighter with the clipped wings. So let's just give a sample of the roll rate. So 3, 2, 1. So she still has that slow to get going, but once she goes, the roll rate is so much faster in this one. So let's give her a roll over. And her turn radius is a lot smaller as well. But maybe not a lot smaller, but it is definitely a smaller turn radius. So she has a lot more control, a lot more elevations, a lot more maneuverability on the clipped wing variant, I must say. So it is great to see that you get both variations with their idiosyncrasies included in the one package. Alright, now obviously this aircraft is primarily a day fighter, day operations, but as a nod to night operations, it does have two spotlights or two internal floodlights that do light up part of your instrument panel. These are controlled just from two little swivel dials down the bottom here, and that's pretty much about it. That's really all I have to say about it. They sort of go on and off, and that's pretty much it. Otherwise, you have the inbuilt cockpit flashlight. So just while we're heading towards Farnborough, where we'll be landing today, I do want to actually, this is one of the other bugbears that I sort of have about it. It's a minor thing, but it is something that I do notice. So with the sound set, as I said, overall the sound set's not bad. I think it's pretty good. Get a little bit repetitive from time to time, but overall, you've really got to be actively listening to hear the repeat in it. So overall, not too bad. However, when you're flying with the canopy open, which was fairly standard to do in an aircraft like the Spitfire Mk IX, there is a quirk in it which does throw me quite a lot. And so let me just open the canopy to be able to show you that one. So while we're flying in this direction, the sound fairly full-throated, fairly normal, that's fine. However, when I turn my head, the sound gets very, very quiet. If anything, it should almost get louder. So that is, I'm not sure what it is, but I just feel either the sound should stay the same or should get either louder or go on the side there. It just feels like there's something, yeah, it just feels like, I don't know, something about the sound cones, I don't know what it is. It's a minor thing, it's not a showstopper. Like the other sort of little quirks that I showed before, they're not showstoppers, but they are something to be cognizant of. That now the developer is aware of these, so the ones we talked about here, said all the bugs we talked about today, the developer's aware of them and is working on them. So the fact that they're aware of them, actively working on them, is great, and hopefully we'll see a fix very soon. But as I said, I just wanted to highlight that one while we're on our cruise back. So let's cut now to our approach. Now you may have noted before when I did the dive maneuver, I actually rolled inverted before pulling down into the dive. Now there's a reason for that, because the aircraft had carburetors rather than fuel injected engines, so they would suffer when the aircraft endured positive G. They would actually suffer fuel starvation. And that was one of the hallmarks to be able to note to see if this aircraft does it. Now, I've been told that the modelling of that has been improved, so let's give that a try. Okay, so it doesn't fuel starve the engine completely, but you do hear the performance drop. You hear the performance drop, and you see the boost drop as well. So great on the good work on the team to actually model that little quirk of engines like this. The aircraft is just so well done. As I said, the history of the Mk IX is absolutely fascinating because, as I said, it was intended purely as a stopgap measure, as an emergency sort of stopgap measure to battle the 190 while the Mk VIII would become the definitive, mass-produced version of the Spitfire. But instead, the Mk IX would go on to produce over 4,000 airframes would be produced, and they would serve with air forces well beyond, all over the world, well beyond the Second World War, well into the 1950s in parts of the world as well. So it has quite the thoroughbred and quite the history, varied history as well, and that is covered across in many of the liveries and paint schemes that's covered off in the aircraft. Alright, so with that, what we're going to do is we'll take a break here in the video. We'll rejoin the video here as we enter the circuit for landing on what is one of the most challenging parts of landing a warbird, particularly a Spitfire, with its narrow undercarriage. Of course, is getting the aircraft down and down safely. Alright, as we're currently approaching downwind for 24 at Farnborough here for our final landing here today. One of the biggest challenges that you face with this aircraft is the fact that because she is so aerodynamically streamlined and just aerodynamically beautiful, this aircraft does not like to slow down. She really does not like to slow down, exactly like the real aircraft as well. So that is quite a bit of a challenge. The other thing as well is that with the flaps, so it has a single setting for flaps. The flaps, to be honest, act more like giant air brakes. Like literally, they are barn doors that pop out at the bottom of the aircraft. So that has a whole heap of patterns of behaviour you have to be aware of when landing this aircraft. So the idea is you've got to get it below 160 miles per hour to be able to extend the gear. And the other problem, of course, because again we talked about before the visibility being an issue with the fact that the nose of the aircraft is so long. One of the things that you have to do is you essentially, one of the tips from reading up on real Spitfire pilots is that they do this long curving approach coming in to landing as well, so you can try and keep the runway in sight as much as you can. So we're going to be trying that today. Do not be surprised if you mangle your first few landings in this aircraft. Do not be surprised at all. So we're going to still trying to bleed off that airspeed at the moment. Throttle's idle, mixture is full, supercharger is off. Okay. Gear extending. Fortunately, not like the early models of Spitfire where you had to like hand pump the gear. It is just simply a single lever that pulls the gear down. I'm going to try and send this a little bit further, a little bit fast here. A little bit fast here, aiming for a touchdown of around about 90 to 110 miles per hour. I said that flat kicking in there really changes the behaviour of the aircraft. Definitely did not do that curving approach very well at all. I'm going to try and keep that about 100 miles per hour, watching the power. And trying to aim for a 3-point landing. She's very docile in the air, but not so docile in finals like this. Oh, nearly lost that wing. Alright, and try and keep the back pressure on the stick to keep the tail on the ground to keep you with decent control, otherwise she will bounce away. And careful on the brakes as well, because she does have a tendency to tip forward if you're not careful. And there we go. Down, safe and sound. Now we're just going to taxi safely away now. Alright, let's taxi this aircraft to parking, and then we'll shutter the aircraft down and give our final thoughts on the Spitfire Mk IX from Flyingiron Simulations. Alright, there we are in place, parked in place. Okay, so we click there to engage parking brake. Alright, and then mixture to cut off. And I love how the engine winds down, like she doesn't just immediately cut off. Alright, let's go through the rest of our shutdown here. Let's go. Fuel pump is set to off, pitot heat off, radiator flap is off. Okay, fuel close shut-off valve. Relock that. We probably should have relocked that earlier. Alright, and everything else is set. Position lights are off. And battery master. And battery master off. Okay, there we go. Okay, alright. Let's open our cockpit door. And let's give our final thoughts. Alright, final thoughts for this aircraft. I love it, is basically the only thing I can say. Like, I absolutely love it, and I cannot recommend it enough. For a couple of very important reasons as well, is that this aircraft doesn't compromise. And I think that's probably the biggest point here, is that there is very little compromise in how it doesn't baby you. It doesn't baby you. It doesn't treat you like an idiot. It actually says, if you want to fly this aircraft, you are going to have to fly it by the numbers. So from what I can tell, from what I've read up on the settings of the boost to the power settings that you use, the prop RPM that you're using for the aircraft looks right for cruise. Performance, as again, for somebody who has never flown a Spitfire and probably sadly never get to fly a real one themselves, this is probably pretty much as close as I'm going to get, and I can say that it feels amazing. The challenges that you get from being able to take off and land and even just taxi an aircraft like this, because it really invokes the challenges of a bygone era of aviation that is now, sadly, for the most part, relegated to history. That is now something for movies and for video games. So in that regard, I think that the team at Flyingiron Simulations has done an incredible job of bringing this aircraft to life in Microsoft Flight Simulator. I think this is definitely the sim it was waiting for. I cannot speak for how it compares to the X-Plane 11 version or the DCS one because I have not flown either. But in terms of flying, this thing is outstanding, and I'm going to call it and say I think it's better than the A2A Spitfire. It is also a later model, so that probably does change a lot of the facets of the design as well. But again, I absolutely love this. I really, really do. And the fact that the development team is, picked up on a couple of issues and is actively working to fix them is great. The couple of issues that we have, so the tipping forward, because of a lock parking brake if you use the spawn on runway, and you use the startups animation sequence, or the starting spawned in horizontal and having the tail drop when you first load in. They are minor things and doesn't affect the actual flying of the aircraft, which is, again, as I said, is absolutely amazing. So overall, I've got to say a huge congratulations and well done and bravo Zulu to the team at Flyingiron Simulations for creating an incredible add-on. It really is, and I look forward to seeing you guys and girls create a more work into the future. I cannot wait. So folks, that does now round out my highly recommending review of the Spitfire LF Mark IXC from Flyingiron Simulations, available now direct from their website. I said highly recommended from me. Don't expect but I highly recommend it with a caveat if you're willing to learn and willing to take the time with it. If you just expect to be able to jump in and fly and have it just work, then it may not be for you. You've got to remember to treat this aircraft with respect, and she will reward you in every step of the way. So that's the only thing. That's the only caveat I'm going to say on my endorsement here. All right, as I said, that now wraps up this review. Thank you very much for tuning in, and so I do want to say a huge thank you once again to Flyingiron Simulations for the review copy of this aircraft today. Don't forget, you can catch up with me and all the things I'm up to between videos by finding me on Facebook and on Twitter. Just search NovaWing24. All right, folks, thanks very much for watching. Take care, safe skies to all, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.